Welcome back to the Frontend Coffee Break. This is episode 12, the podcast where we talk about frontend and more frontend.
And a little bit of coffee.
Yes, if you drink coffee. If not, you're also welcome. That is fine. All right, then. Yes, Chucho, welcome back.
Thank you, Ricard. Glad to be back. I'm glad that I get invited every single episode.
I don't know how to present ourselves. Okay, and never mind. We are from Cognizant Eccentric, and today we want to share with you or talk to you about debugging JavaScript, right? So, first of all, well, you know me, you know us. We are all dinosaurs. So, back in the day, Chucho, how did you used to debug your JavaScript?
Well, I think I like many of the people that started working with JavaScript, or maybe even people that start working right nowadays with it. I use the universal command alert.
Oh,
I think that was one of the first. I'm talking about the when I began working with JavaScript, because I started as a developer. Well, we would say a backend developer, then started getting myself into frontend, and eventually, when you start working with JavaScript, yeah, and you just like it more and more because it's fantastic. One of the things that you have that you really miss, that you didn't have in JavaScript, but you had in other environments. Well, Java, I was working mainly, was the possibility of debugging. And so whatever you use, it's like you put on an alert. It's like, tell me when you go through here, tell me when you go through that. And it was painful. I don't know if you also had that experience using the alerts.
Yes, at the very beginning, I used alerts, and it was painful indeed. I mean, in the end, it blocks the whole thing, and you get to click to close it, and it's very cumbersome. And luckily for me, this quickly faded away in favor of Firebug.
Well, yeah, I mean, Firebug was definitely a game changer. It came out, I think that when I really began working a little bit more with the front end in 2006, and it changed front end development. I mean, I think that was like one of the biggest milestone in
Yeah,
development,
no
because
doubt.
it made it possible. Before that, it was horrible, and at that point, we were starting to get different browsers. Well, we had Firefox, we had Internet Explorer 6, if I'm not mistaken, back then.
Yeah, around that.
I tried to use from time to time Opera, which back then was one of my favorite uh, browsers. But yeah, you have the different browsers, especially Firefox and Internet Explorer, and debugging was horrible, 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 horrible. But Firebug came and rescued. It came and saved the day.
Yeah,
And
no doubt. I mean, in the whole inspector thing, you could inspect the styles and the DOM and everything. For me, as well, it was a game changer, right? Before it was very like, you sure Internet Explorer, and you had some sort of inspector as well, but it was, and then Firebug came, and then Firefox took it. But yeah, man.
And I remember that back then, for example, you could eventually they created an extension that you can use Firebug in other browsers.
Yes, on IE, actually, I did. Yes.
And Internet Explorer had their own developer toolbars, the Internet Explorer developer toolbars, which weren't that bad. At least when you have nothing and you go for that, they weren't
Right.
that bad. But of course, never as good as Firebug. And I think that they came out around 2007. But one of the bad things is I don't remember until when Chrome came out. It came out. I think it was Chrome the first one that implemented the evolution of Alert. Don't remember the name. What was the year that Chrome came out? I don't.
I do not know.
Well, but it came out with one feature that was a game changer, which was the console dot something.
Something console.lock. That's what we at the beginning, and I wanted to ask you guys also, the listeners. I mean, what kind of developers are you? Like, are you the developer who console logs everything? Are you the developer who adds debuggers, or what type of what about you, Chicho? What do you use most?
I I am actually a console info developer.
Ooh,
I
hold
Yeah,
on a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
second. Okay, so it's not log but info. We should talk about this.
I don't know
But
why.
you
It's
like
just
the better
mechanical.
output. Okay, different output. Okay, so if we talk about like console dot something, there's many things that maybe the listeners don't know about. I'm a console log kind of guy. Use it a lot. I love it. But you know that there's also console dot table, and the console dot info you just mentioned, console dot group, console dot assert. Do you use
But
any of those apart from the info?
usually not. But it's funny because sometimes I think that the console dot table is something that could be useful, right?
Yes, totally. I mean, for this episode, I was doing this research, right? And then, damn, yes, I remember that I have console table. I never use it, but when you see the output, how it looks on an array or an object, it's like I should use it more often, man, because it looks damn good.
Yeah, usually when you just console something and it says it's just a list of, well, depending on how it can appear in the console, it's just a string, a big string
Yeah,
with
yeah, like an
commas and
array, you see everything in there. You have to click to open the array, but with console table, it just already prints it to you on a perfectly matter. So I need to force myself to use it, but I never remember.
And one thing that I by default usually, well, when you use alert, you usually use it to say, here I am. I
Okay.
remember that was one of the first use cases that I had. Like, where am I? Is my code going through this place?
Hmm.
I didn't care about the value. No, no, no. I wanted to know if the code was going through that place. And back then, you used alert for that. Nowadays, when I do it, I just use the console info and I use one specific keyword. I don't know if when you write, I mean, for example, when you add a style using the developer toolbar, when you add a style to an element just to quickly style it to see where it is or something, what style do you add, for example?
Color, background, border. Yeah.
I
Color
usually
probably it's a fair one. Yeah.
I usually go for border, and I usually write the same thing. Solid 1 pixel red. It's like mechanical.
Yeah. Yeah.
When
Yeah.
and I think that a lot of people do this. I don't know why. And for the console info, I do the same thing. It's like, oh, I need an output. I say console.info, and I put cosa, the word cosa, which is
Thing in
thing.
Spanish.
Yes.
Okay.
And if I need a second one, I use losa.
What? So
So I
you're not
have
a hello world kind of guy, but Cosa kind of guy.
I'm a
Okay.
cosa losa kind of guy. Yeah, yeah. I put my
Wow.
cosa, my losa, and actually, there's one project that I did that has a console, no, a comment that says cosa somewhere because I forgot to take it away.
Oops. Oopsie.
Easter egg, Easter egg. But anyhow, yeah, I put cosa losa. I don't know if you have any specific like message that you put.
No, I mean usually I want to print values.
Mm,
Usually when,
mm.
when I'm console logging, which I do every day, no doubt. I'm usually printing stuff. Not. Yeah, sure. Maybe a hey could be hey, or even my name. but usually it's it. I'm printing stuff. Yeah.
And I think that this is something like very personal. That when you're working with different people, you see who's done something or that because based on that, I have
Right.
people that write fruits like they put pineapple, pear, and
It's
things like this,
very
banana.
yeah. Yeah.
There's other people that actually put insults.
I should use emoji. I mean, if it was easier to type it in VS Code, but you have to open the Mac emoji inserter. But emojis are also cool. Yeah.
But and now that you mentioned this, it's funny that you in console you can actually um, not have the boring message, but you can also do something more interesting. Can't you?
Yes, you can actually style the console log message with CSS, and it's rather cool. I think on our website, or at least we had it. We had when you open the DevTools, it says, "Hey, we're hiring. Here's the link to our website in a nice purpley bluish color," and it's nice. I think most of the tech companies have this sort of Easter eggs in the console log when you open. I think like Facebook, when you open it, super big and red. It says, "Please don't touch anything here. You could be being hacked or whatever it is, trying to warn you." So yeah, styling the console log. I've never done it in a real project. Like I never had the need to actually
Hmm.
style it, but for fun, yeah.
I was thinking about what use case could you have for this kind of thing, and the only one that came to mind, at least when I gave it a quick thought, was, for example, you could actually create a utility
Hmm.
library
Hmm.
that you could use while you're debugging, maybe in your application, or use if you use aspect-oriented programming or something. But you could use like a styling, so it depends on what you're logging could be not only because you have log warning, the typicals info and
Hmm.
error, but you could add additional things like, oh, it's a function, so it should be blue, or the text should be bigger, or oh, I'm inside a, I don't know, a utility, a class, or this or that, and you can
I see
actually
it. I
create.
see it. Definitely. I think if you have a library or something, and you can from the front end turn on the debug mode, and then you print better stuff, more pretty messages. Yeah, I see it. Good point.
Now that there was one console that you mentioned that I was curious, the Assert. I don't know if you've used it.
No, again, it's something that I read while I was researching for this, and it turns out you can actually write message in the console if the assertion is false. So I would suppose you do console assert, and then you say if my
Oh,
variable doesn't exist or something, and then if it turns false, it would show the message. And I don't know when would you use it in production, but yeah.
This is interesting because I think that although the console is quite a powerful tool, it is something that at least in my case only use when I'm developing and I want to use see one thing or another, and then I just keep on removing them.
Right, but the keyword here is developing, right? You never push these console logs to production on the final build. It's always when you're developing and changing stuff and debugging, but you know.
Well, you can always, for example, also do a post processing where you remove,
Hmm.
you can put all the consoles there, have them there, and when you compile it, it can remove all the console elements and then compile it for production without a console. That could be out there an
Yeah,
option,
in my
but
case, I just use ESLint. ESLint doesn't allow you by default to add console logs unless you've
hmm.
changed the configuration. But that way, we keep away people from pushing things into to the repo with debuggers and things like that. Okay, so now that we know that we have console logs, we also have the debugger. You can write on the code itself. With these two, just with these two, before we go deeper into the dev tools, which one is the most do you use? Is it console log, or do you ever use debug? Or
I'm usually depending. I think I go for the console log. It's quite useful, but no. I usually go for breakpoints more than console log.
okay, so breakpoints, but you do that from the dev tools, or you do a breakpoint from the code itself, adding like debugger.
No. The only time that I do a breakpoint from the code itself is when for whatever reason the code that I see on that, I think that we're going to talk about it a bit later, the code that you see in the output of the code is very different to what you're working with. I
Hmm.
usually do put a debugger because it's like, or I need to very specifically stop in a very specific area, I do put it. But no, I usually go for the breakpoints, which is, I think, an underrated tool.
Yes. Now here's I do it differently. So when I'm doing a console log, I usually also drop a debugger in the same location in the code. So when I save, I go to the browser and refresh. I got my breakpoint already in there, and I don't have to open the DevTools, find the file, find the line, and then click on the breakpoint because I'm already on the VS Code, and I can just write console log, enter, and then debugger, and I have it there. So I use it quite a lot to stop the execution there. But I see that breakpoints are quite powerful. How do you use them? How do you set breakpoints?
I usually have I use them in two ways. The typical way is basically just I'm looking for what moment I want the code to stop, so I can analyze the data that is there. And it's very nice. For example, the Chrome Developer Toolbars, at least, they when you stop the execution of the code, you can see information about the values of the variables already inside the code, and that would be like the basic case. But the other one that I use, and it's very typical, is the log breakpoint. And yeah, when you are, I don't remember the exact name, the conditional, no, it's not a or is it a conditional breakpoint? But well, basically the idea is that you have the breakpoints that stop the execution, but you could also put a breakpoint that instead of stopping the execution, just logs that the code went through there. It's like a
Nice.
console log, but
Okay.
from the developer toolbars. So it's very nice. And the nice thing is that you can always, that's the basic thing. I think you can right click, you select the option, and then when the code goes through there, it's like adding a console log, a console log, and you can output anything you want. And the nice thing is that you can take it a step further, and you can actually make a what's it called? The term has just went away and is running away from Barcelona right now. You can make an if statement there. You can make a logical
Yeah,
statement and say
condition, right? Yeah,
a
yeah.
condition. Thank you
Mhm.
very, very much. And you can make a condition, and you can say, okay, so if the value of this variable is this, then log it. If not, just get by. So it's very interesting because it's a very powerful tool where you have a log. You don't stop the execution, but you can see that it's going through there without having to modify the code. And you can even tell it, okay, when this value is like this, then just show it.
It's good. I don't use it. I don't use either like conditional breakpoints to stop the execution if something happens, or constant like, conditional logging. I don't use them, but I think I should try it more. I guess. Yeah, it's good. Don't pollute like the code. I mean, the thing is, why I don't use it directly so much in the DevTools is because I have my development environment, right? I don't usually debug production code that it's minified or production code that I don't have access to. I usually it's on my local environment when I can save and it really like hot deploys or hot reloads the browser. and it's really fast. So I don't really have a need for going to the DevTools and do stuff when I have already my component open, line 3 at the debugger or at a console log, right? So yeah. What else from the DevTools? JavaScript. So we already mentioned production and minifying and all those things. I think recently, I don't know if you noticed, but I don't know exactly when. Okay, defining recently, but Chrome has started to automatically prettifying the JavaScript. I think before, when you opened a source in DevTools, you would see it minified. Then you would have to click on the corner. There's like a mustache icon, and then it would prettify the file. And I think now it does it by default, right?
Well, yeah, that was one of the, I think, one of the big features that we got recently, which is, well, not recently, it's some time
Yeah,
ago,
I don't know exactly when, but yeah.
that you could actually uh, see the code immediately, especially when you're not working in development environment, that you're working on a already modified. You can see it, and it may be not that simple to debug or to add a breakpoint, but yes, it is almost automatically now.
Mm-hmm. Even though you will see it as A equals B plus Z and all of it, everything is mangled, but still something useful. Something I really use a lot of times is the call stack. When you add a breakpoint, and then on the right side of the DevTools, at least on Chrome, right, you have the call stack that it shows, okay, this part of the code or this function, what is the trail, or where does it come from, right? And then you could click, and then it goes through the files as up, let's say on the tree, and you can follow up where it came from, and it's useful to know, okay, this one came from this function, and then you see the scope on this function. You can say, okay, well, the variables there, so it's quite useful.
Just to clarify, I was getting a little bit nervous about the no nervous, remembering
Anxious.
the anxious about the breakpoint. And yes, when you have a breakpoint in Chrome, just right click on it, edit breakpoint, and you have three types of breakpoints: the typical breakpoint, which is stop; the conditional breakpoint that we were mentioning, which is stop only if; and the log point, which is don't stop, just spit
Nice.
the whatever you want. It's not a combination of only spit if, but it's just a log point, which is quite nice. Um, but yeah.
Nice, thank you. Another thing that I think sometimes goes like it doesn't, it goes unseen. It's like you can actually, when you do a breakpoint, you can do stuff in the console. I mean, sometimes developers don't know that about it, but if you just, you're in the DevTools, you're on the source panel, you stop the breakpoint execution, then you open the console at the bottom, and then you can run stuff. You can print actual variables. You can do stuff on the same moment of the execution. So it's nice to see, okay, what would this be, or does this equal to something, and then you can debug it in there. So
Yeah. And one thing that you can use, a tool, a very interesting tool that you can use, is the JavaScript snippets, which
okay.
is basically you can create this pieces of code that you can run whenever, just like you said, you can open the console and run code there. Usually when you want to run repeated code, you want to run it over and over and over. What you basically do, I usually start either with the arrows up or down, trying to use, because it remembers the last commands that you've used. You can go back in the commands
History,
list
yeah.
in the history. But you could, for example, create pieces of JavaScript code that you want to run a lot for whatever reason, that you run constantly, and you can create what is called a JavaScript snippet, which basically, in the developer toolbars, you can just add a snippet, give it a name. In the snippet, just add the piece of code that you want to run, and whenever you want to run it, you press Command in Mac, Command P, and then I think that you select the exclamation mark, and then it tells you, okay, which is the snippet that you want to run, and you put the name of the snippet, enter, and it runs that piece of code. So it's interesting because you can create a more complex add more complex pieces of code, more functions or whatever, and you can run them like that quickly.
That's
And
nice.
yeah, I mean, if you, for example, I don't know, you need to, for example, add a token, or you need to debug in some sort of way, or you need to make sure that certain function is there, you could quickly add them like this.
Okay, so you already mentioned Command P. Very interesting. How often do you use shortcuts in the DevTools?
I am not a power user. I must admit,
Oh,
I am not a power user. But I, one of the first, when I started seeing a little bit or getting a little bit into performance, um, one of the persons that was teaching me this, he was a power user, and he was
Ah,
using and the only way that he worked with developer toolbars was through shortcuts. Command P, find a file. Command, I think it's Command Shift P, and then you can open specific functionality. I only use it when I try to find a feature that I am not that I don't have visually visible for some reason, and I want quickly to find it. And basically, the only feature that I try to find this way is the search feature.
hmm. Okay. Okay. I mean, when you told me about it, I realized that I'm an amateur. So I, whenever I need to open like a JavaScript file, I go to the network. I filter by name, right, and then right click, open source. And
Hmm.
now that I've tried again the shortcuts, it's so much faster to just open the DevTools, Command P, name of the file, done. And it's already open for you on minified. So I really need to change my habit here and I start using the shortcuts, no doubt.
And this is interesting. I mean, regarding, I do exactly the same thing, and then I sometimes see other people when I work in that they are not using shortcuts, and I get a little bit exasperated. And I'm talking about other stuff, not necessarily with a toolbar, but it's like when you want to copy, like command copy, and there are people that rather do it in a different way, which is fine. But usually, since you're not used to it, you find it's like, oh, this is super slow. And I think that
Yes,
the same thing happens right now, that you have the shortcuts in the developer toolbars. We don't use it, and probably people that actually use them,
they
if
get
they see
annoyed
us,
by us. Yes, so we,
it's
we
like
need to fix it. We need to fix it. We don't want to be annoying anymore. So I'll definitely fix it. Shortcuts, very nice. One quick thing wanted to ask you, and I will still have time.
Hmm,
Since we talk about debugging and production and local,
hmm, hmm,
the
hmm.
hot topic, the hot take, the whatever it is, it's hot. Source maps in production. What's your take?
I must say that I'm not a big fan of source maps, but I know that they have their uses, but I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, my heart is also divided. I mean, on one side, I think whenever you have a big issue in production, they should be useful, right? Because then you could, of course, see the source. You could also see the name of the function, and it will be so easy to debug where you are, what's happening. But on the other side, I'm like, okay, so the build is going to be slower. It's going to be easier for third-party people to look at my source. I know that it doesn't incur any penalty on performance because if they only download it if you open the dev tools, they're not downloaded by default. But still, I'm not like, I don't know, shipping sort of to production. I'm not a fan. Not a fan.
Well, it's like the thing is that, for example, you're mentioning one of the biggest advantages of having the source map, which is that you can debug about something in production,
Right.
but you have better ways to do that. You have better ways to
Yes,
work
you could
on.
not minify your code, and then
No.
the production.
No. For example, there's one of the tools that I use when I have to debug something in production, because sometimes it happens that the although the JavaScript file and the CSS is exactly the same, the
Mhm.
content is not. And
Okay.
for whatever reason, the stars align, and in production they have a different content that you cannot reproduce in your local instance, or maybe they have different files, different versions of other files that are
Mhm.
imported and not under your control, and that you don't have access in the local environment.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
what do you do? How do you debug this? One of the tools that I use from Chrome is the resource overriding,
Okay.
and you can activate the resource overriding fairly simple. And what this does is that you can make changes in JavaScript, CSS, or any resource that you receive. You can make changes and save those changes, and they continue being there when you reload the page. So, for example, one thing that I use if I'm using the Chrome toolbar, because there's other options, I usually, for example, take my JavaScript code from my local instance, modify completely the JavaScript code that it's in production, see if I can reproduce the code there, and I have a non-minified code now in production, and it's going to be using
Interesting.
that one every time. Yeah, and makes it easier to change. And you can just go there and change the things. You can even work in your local instance, change
Hmm.
it, and paste that. There's other ways to do it more efficiently, but also the nice thing is that you can also modify the HTML, for example, if you need it. It's like, okay, is this, if I add a class and I add this, is this going to work? I mean, you can go into production, modify things there, make sure that they're working, and then you know that at least certain changes, certain things work. So yeah, you can use the maps, or you can use this other option that you
I
eliminate the
like it.
maps.
I mean, the last time I tried, it didn't work for me. Maybe because there was too much JavaScript, and then this is another issue. But also, like with how does it work with Webpack and things like that, where actually your bundles they depend on this common chunk from Webpack, and if you paste the source, maybe it's not referenced well, or I don't know.
Well,
It's
certainly
mm,
it's not something that you can use. Like it's not perfect, but it's
right. Yeah.
something that that could help you in a lot of the cases.
Hmm.
Then, for example, you also have extensions that could you can connect the JavaScript file that it's that the website is fetching for one that you have in your local server. So it just overwrites the URL and sends your own file, so
File.
you can
Hmm.
actually do modifications in your development environment.
That's nice. That's nice.
Not not a perfect solution, but it's a good one.
Alrighty. Any recommendations for the listeners? I have one. It's a website called devtoolstips.org.
Hmm.
And I just discovered this today. And it's a nice set of tips, of course, devtoolstips.org, about the DevTool, things you might not know about. And they have this social media channels. You can follow them there. And then they give you snippets from time to time that, hey, you can now do this. And now in Chrome 120 we'll be able to do that and this, and it's good. Check it out.
Also, the official resource of Chrome developer toolbars. I mean, there's the official documentation, and it's separated by different topics. You can go there, look at the documentation, and find out features that you might not know that there exist. I mean, the toolbars have evolved in such a way that you can even check repaints. You can even check layout shifts. You can even check, for example, um, do wide searches. There's many things that you can do. Performance. I mean, there are tools for performance, for accessibility.
Totally. I
It's
mean, yeah,
amazing.
we haven't covered the whole
No,
performance
no, no,
thing
no.
and memory, and we haven't gone there that far, but yeah.
Not only that, breakpoints. We've already also covered the surface. There, one of the other breakpoints that I actually use are the DOM manipulation breakpoints. When, especially for example, I've been in a situation when you say, okay, this shouldn't be here. Why is this piece of code here, this piece of HTML here? It shouldn't be here. So you can actually go to the node that you know that it's changing or above, and put a breakpoint that when a child changes, when the content changes, when it's removed, when the property is modified, do a breakpoint to whatever is doing that modification. And that is quite useful. You can find a lot of bugs this way. It's like, why is this button not here? And you can just add a breakpoint, a DOM manipulation breakpoint, and boop, you can find. And you can even go a step further, and you even have um, event breakpoints. You can breakpoint when
Mm.
an event is triggered. I don't know, click,
Click or yeah. Hmm.
mouse move, mouse enter. If it's coded, you can do it. And I mean, it just blew my mind that you can do this kind of things, and it can be in certain situations very useful.
Yeah, I don't use the event one, but definitely the subtree modification or attribute modification, it's powerful, very powerful. All right, anything else you want to plug, Tucha?
Well, no, in this case, I would say that you can even check code coverage with the developer toolbars, which is quite interesting.
Yes, as well, CSS and JavaScript. And when you see that you're not using anything, it's time to tree shake. All right, then then we sign off for today. We had a question for you guys. What's your preferred debug method in JavaScript? And if you have any tips or recommendations, please post them below.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Chucho.
Thank you, Ricardo.
See you in the next Frontend Coffee Break.